once again. This is What's the Story? My name is Joe Painter here on the People Chronicles, and we heard about Keystone Crossroads. Perhaps you have too. What exactly is that? It's a WHYY project, and with us here in the People Chronicles studio is Naomi Starobin. You are the editor for WHYY's Keystone Crossroads project.
Indeed.
What is it?
Well, it's a full state project. We've got reporters across the state, and the topic of our project is cities. So we're looking very closely at Pennsylvania cities. We know that there are problems in the cities. We're going to define that. We're going to talk about solutions. We're going to look at cities in Pennsylvania and outside of Pennsylvania that have found ways out of some problems. As a matter of fact, we've started. We're about 7 or 8 months into the project now. We have a website, we have a Facebook page. We broadcast our stories throughout the state on 4 public media stations: WHYY in Philadelphia, WESA in Pittsburgh, WITF in Harrisburg, and WPSU in State College. And we have a reporter in each station as well.
So are those 4 cities being spotlighted or really picked apart, investigated?
Those 4 and many more.
Oh, okay.
We are using those as bases, but we're all over the state.
So is Reading then going to be a barometer of sorts for this size city in the state?
Well, absolutely. Reading is a really important place for us to be talking about. And by the way, in Reading, people can hear 2 of our public radio stations, WITF in Harrisburg and WHYY, right, depending on where you are and where the hills are and all that. But Reading's an important city for us to talk about. It is very much a distressed city, and we can talk a little bit about some of the stories that are coming out of Reading for us and the important things to tell. And the way we tell our stories is we may focus on a problem in one city and a solution in one city, but these are really stories for people across the state. And that's why this project was conceived, because sure, you have local newspapers and TV stations and radio stations talking about their own places, cities large and small. But who's talking about what these cities have in common? And believe me, I was warned when I took this job, people in Pittsburgh don't care about what happens in Philadelphia, and people in Reading don't care about what happens in State College. And that may be true historically, but the point of this project is to unite the commonality of what's going on in these cities and look for solutions.
And why reinvent the wheel? If they found a solution to a particular problem in Pittsburgh, we don't have to find yet another solution. We perhaps can replicate that solution.
Exactly. And maybe some wisdom will filter up to the, political leaders in a city, and, they'll see the light.
Does wisdom get to political leaders?
Well, that's a topic for a whole other show, I'm afraid.
I just had to throw that in there. In your experience so far with the Keystone Crossroads project, you said you are looking at cities outside the state. Generally speaking, how do cities in Pennsylvania fare? Are we up to par? Are we
we're not
holding our own?
We're not, and that's why the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which is funding this project, selected this. They had a lot of different proposals for projects all over the country, but they saw that something can be learned by looking at Pennsylvania cities, and we're a bit of a poster child for urban problems. We're
Why?
not the.
Did we unearth that yet? Why are we subpar?
Well, I mean, it depends who you ask. But one common answer I hear is that the state leadership is generally is predominantly non-urban. So the people in power in Harrisburg represent districts that are non-urban for the most part, and so that's where the political power lies, and the problems of those areas get solved a little bit more efficiently.
That makes a little bit of sense in that Pennsylvania, I believe our number 1 industry is agriculture. So perhaps they're serving the larger base geographically anyway, not necessarily population-wise, of their constituency if they're catering more to agricultural needs rather than urban needs.
And suburban and rural needs, right? Not just agriculture, but yeah.
So Keystone Crossroads, I understand it's called Keystone Crossroads Rust or Revival, which I found interesting because I can't imagine anybody saying rust. Or voting for rust, or
well,
if it's a choice.
I think that the question is, what is our future? Will it be continued rust, and rust in the broadest sense? Although we do talk about infrastructure and those kinds of problems, but rust meaning decay of cities, urban decay, and lack of economic, revitalization.
Have you found when we look at economic revitalization and not just urban decay and infrastructure, that as you're doing these forums, and one is coming up, I believe, Monday,
exactly
26th here in Reading, that the human resource, the people of the city, are the most valuable resource? Are they stepping up to the plate that way?
We've been meeting a lot of, I don't know which people you're referring to.
Citizens, the residents.
When we have these forums, and as you said, we've had 4 before, Philadelphia, Harrisburg, Pittsburgh, and Altoona. Mm-hmm. People come, and dozens and dozens of people come, and we ask them very pointed questions about, what are you seeing in your neighborhood? What's important to you? What would you tell the governor if you had 30 seconds of his time at your kitchen table? What does he not understand about your community? Mm-hmm. What are some bad habits in your community?
These are
what
good
people
questions.
do that just make you crazy? And often the answer is people just think we can't get better. People say we should be doing the same thing we've been doing historically, and yet they complain that things aren't getting better. So the forums are a place, to get back to your question, are a place for people to come and express, what they haven't been able to express, in their lives to people of power, say.
So once you get their opinions and their thoughts and what would help turn the city around in the minds of the residents of these cities, what happens with that information? Where does it go next?
Our reporters are at these forums, and they listen and they talk and they ask questions. We also have formal moderators that make sure important questions are being asked and that everybody has a chance to answer them. And by the way, in Reading, we will have interpreters as well, because there's a large Spanish-speaking community. And so the reporters get these story ideas. There's only so much you can know by calling the mayor or calling the city planner. You have to hear from people in neighborhoods who care and who are seeing things on the street. So those ideas turn into stories that we tell to people all over the state.
Do these stories then get to those in positions to make a difference or make some changes?
That is the hope.
Okay.
That is the hope.
This is a good hope. It's Keystone Crossroads, and it's staged by WHYY.
Right.
And the event, or the open forum here in Reading, it is open, I presume.
It is absolutely open. There's a registration page.
Where is that?
Well, there's a link, and I'm sorry, I don't know it in my head. Do you happen to know it?
The link is I imagine if we went to WHYY, we would find it there. Or if we Google Keystone Crossroads, Google's a pretty amazing internet tool that will get there.
Yes.
And then you can find the registration for Monday, January 26th. Yes. It's at the Citadel.
It's at the Citadel. We wanted a place where we could have a room where everybody could gather initially, and then we break people into small groups. And by the way, dinner is included. It's from Mi Casa Su Casa.
Wait a minute. Free dinner? We're in Berks County. Everybody's there. You'll have standing room only.
Well, we understand that it may not be convenient to go from work and then try to grab dinner and come, so we're just all in one place. So we wanted an auditorium big enough so that we could explain the project to people and sort of set the ground rules, as it were, and then break up into these small groups where people would all have a chance to talk.
And what time is the event?
4:30.
At 4:30
Dinner
on Monday
starting
afternoon.
at 4.
Dinner
Get underway at 4:30.
If you can't get there at 4 or 4:30, then can you come in after dinner? Can you register? Perhaps I'm working until 5 o'clock and I really want to participate. Is that an option?
I wouldn't discourage anybody from doing that. Sure.
Okay. And I believe we have a website here, so thank you very much. And it is, yes, go right to WHYY.org and events. And under events, you will find the Keystone Crossroads project. Are the questions that will be put forth on Monday the same questions that are put forth in Altoona and in Pittsburgh?
Yes.
So
the answers are completely different. For instance, one thing we ask in each place is we ask people to respond to certain words. So in Philadelphia, for instance, we said, Philadelphia, what do you think of? People said, Liberty Bell. They said,
brotherly love is on my mind.
Brotherly love, right? Things like that. But they also say sort of snarky things about, or negative things about how they feel about communities. And we asked Philadelphians about Reading and Harrisburg and Pittsburgh, and then we went to another city and asked the same questions. So it's very interesting to see what you get. For instance, for Reading, Philadelphians said outlets. They said pagoda, but they also said large Hispanic population. They said crime, they said poverty. Right. So this is how people envision the city from outside the city. And we have to recognize that people have limited knowledge of other places or they have a stereotype in their head. But those are important to talk about and to understand. Perceptions are strong. So when you're here asking that question outside the city, you're getting the perception that people have. Yes. Does the perception often match, or is it more typically vastly different than the reality?
in your experience with this project so far?
It differs from place to place, so I would say it differs from reality. I was in Pittsburgh recently and at a coffee shop, and I asked the waitress, have you been to Philadelphia? I told her I was from Philadelphia, and I said, have you been there? She goes, oh, no, you know. And I said, have you been to Harrisburg? And she said, yes, once by mistake.
Oh, my goodness.
So, yeah, she got misdirected to Harrisburg. So, you know, people do stay where they are to a certain extent in the state. And the state is also kind of very high on the list of aging in place, meaning people tend to not leave the state. People tend to stay in their hometown, and they age in place. So for our project, for Keystone Crossroads, that brings up the whole notion of, well, how much resources do we need to help people who are aging, you know, and what does that mean for city budgets and all of those priorities that cities have to make? A
lot of information is being mined, I suspect, in these forums, and very valuable information. You two can be part of it, and we'll find out more about that in our next segment on the Keystone Crossroads project being conducted by WHYY. And our guest for this segment is Naomi Starobin, and she is the editor. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.